Hello, and welcome to Soft Human Voice. This is a podcast that is dedicated to helping you to remember your source and divine connection, to remind you that you're not alone, that you are loved, that you are wise, you're intuitive, and you have way more co creative power than you think you do. And so we want to remember this together. And that was kind of the intention of this podcast when I started it. And then I found my cool friend, Courtney, and decided, or she found me more like, and decided that I wanted to do something with her on this podcast. So let me introduce Courtney. Courtney Sprunk is a tarot reader and intuitive guide with almost a decade of experience helping women come home to themselves and using the wisdom of cards and I would say her own amazing psychism. She helps dismantle limiting beliefs and unlock inner clarity and guide women towards the life they're truly meant to live. And I have to say that Courtney's work, having experienced it firsthand, is deeply soulful and rich and so positive and life affirming, and gave me goosebumps to say. So that's how much I love Courtney. We've been doing this not very long, me and Courtney podcast. And we had a Mercury retrograde mishap with our last podcast recording. And so we just decided to skip that topic for now. We're going to come back to it. And my friend Hermione, who incidentally had also found me through my work, A Love Alchemist Notebook, as Courtney did, happened to reach out to me and just kind of send me a bunch of text memos with some really interesting and deep questions. And so this is Hermione Flavia. Sorry, there. I love your name.
It's okay. It's just got like all
Hermione.
of the vowels in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like got a lot. It's got a lot. I got some repetition in mine. Yours is like an V. Anyways, okay, so this woman, Hermione, is amazing. She's a writer, cinema historian, and book reviewer who studied filmmaking in London before going to work in the indie film scene with her screenplays. And she won some internet awards. And she's also covered some red screenings. And she has a YouTube channel called Wildfire Movies. And she has a book channel called Craven Wild. And I go on there intermittently and see that she's sharing some pre-release titles, and sometimes she even shares things that we remember, like nostalgia from childhood, which I really enjoy. So she's a really interesting, dynamic person, as is Courtney, and I thought it would be really fun to podcast and bring you guys together. Say welcome.
So excited. Well, thank you for
having me. I'm Jessica Shepherd. I wrote some books. I've been doing healing arts work for a few decades now, and Soft Human Words on Substack, and now Soft Human Voice. And I'm actually getting ready to launch Soft Human Movement, which is a Qigong practice where you guys can practice with me. So anyways, that said, welcome again.
Well, thank you so much. You are so much more than all of that. And I think that's how Hermione and I found you, is because we're like, who is this amazing ball of chi? So thank you for just
pretty much, yeah. You put that really well, Courtney. Jessica's like,
I am a chi
oh,
ball.
yeah, I wrote some books,
that changed our life. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I use your intuitive deck most days. So you didn't mention your intuitive deck.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you are one of the original fans of that one on my edition number 1, the big box set, which then I went down to a kind of more manageable size. I think you have Courtney, but yeah, I'm just a creative person. That's how I define myself. And that's kind of, the best way. And that's kind of, the best way I can define myself at this point, other than a chi ball, which I may start to use instead.
Makes me hungry though. Makes me think of those like, those like kind of like 70s hors d'oeuvres, like a little chi ball. You're gonna come in and do chi ball? Chi ball?
I think you just made that up. Hermione.
I like it. It's cute though.
Chi ball. Oh, okay. I could go a lot of places with that. Like the cheese tumbling down the. Okay, Hermione, you said something to me in one of those voicemails, and you said the way that a lot of people seem to approach love nowadays is like, can you quote yourself?
So there's a festival in the UK somewhere. I think it's like Scotland or somewhere up north. And it's the cheese rolling festival. And it's a steep, sort of like 45-degree or whatever angle slope. And they roll a ball of cheese down it, and everybody runs after the cheese and just falls down the hill. It's ridiculous. And it's kind of delightful and funny, but people injure themselves as well. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's got cheese in it as well. So anything with cheese in it is kind of funny to me. And so I often think lately, like sometimes the way people approach things, I'm like, you're just kind of running downhill after that cheese, just completely sort of chaotic, bumping into other people, like cartwheeling down this kind of slope, just chaotically. And sometimes that can be a joyful kind of what I think of as like Aries energy. You just throw yourself into it, that sort of fire sign thing. But, obviously as well, it can be not a great thing if you break a limb on the way down. There are other approaches. So, yeah.
There are
Cheese
other
rolling down a
approaches.
hill.
Cheese rolling down a hill. I just thought that was so funny and a line I'd never heard before, but John would definitely participate in that event.
I think I would too. I do have an Aries moon and I do love cheese. But I think of like
You
too,
do
like also I think the way people are approaching love is the same way that cheese is rolling down the hill, catching whatever is on it. Like, ooh, this one's stuck to me
Mm-hmm.
and let me see how I like this. And it's like, what do you mean? Let me see how I like this. Does this even fit your standards or your values or your goals or anything? Like you're just taking whoever swipes on you next or whoever shows up, and then just taking that catch-all vibe. So I thought about
Like,
Yeah.
did you even check what kind of cheese it is that they're throwing down the hill? Because if it's just a bar of like Velveeta, might not be
Yeah.
worth it, guys.
Is it Kraft singles? Because no.
So define your cheese, like that's
Define
big,
your
right?
cheese.
You've got to know what your cheese taste is. Like, do you like the stinky cheese? Okay, we could like keep going with that. But the idea being is that one of the reasons why you reached out is that Hermione, you were kind of tracking this kind of I mean, as we talk about it, it feels very Mercury in Pisces, which is where Pisces is now. It's just kind of loose and sloppy. But like the lack of discernment, the lack of knowing what your yes is in all things. And Hermione was relating it to relationship and, kind of approaching dating apps, for instance. Um, but like I was thinking it's not just about knowing your come from, it's like living in that, like actually living from that place. And like how you were talking about Hermione at one point getting looped into these conversations or these maybe desires or these love strategies of kind of swiping right if they say this, or they say don't say that. And it's like, to me, the minute you go over into the energy or the territory that you're not about, you start living in it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like where mind goes, energy follows. And then suddenly you're living in the no. Suddenly you're living in
Yeah.
what I don't want. And then you focus on that, right? And what you focus on grows, as we know. And then it's like, where am I? I'm all the way over here and there's no one here. So I just find that, like, I know that you find it fascinating and you were, relating it to some of the conversations you've been having. So
Yeah, it's what I'm sort of seeing with friends is like that there's very fixed ideas, and it's very like you can only meet people on dating apps. And then this idea of like, oh, I follow this person and I use the whatever method. And I'm like, method? Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it was fascinating to me to be like, so you have like a method, like a philosophy that you're following in order to eliminate people sort of as they kind of come into your, whatever app you're using, they're sort of coming
Uh-huh.
into your space or whatever. And it's like, yeah, so I had this conversation and this person used this word. And like this person said, if the guy uses this word, that's a red flag. So that's an immediate block and dismiss. And I'm like, it's healthy to have that boundary, I think, and be like, the block and dismiss thing is not such a bad thing. But I think it was sort of this oddly defeatist kind of thing that was it was a very negative sort of aligned idea where I was like, if you find a method that works for you, it's fine. But just the idea of calling it a method and having it being really sort of like the rules and stuff, I'm like, I don't know. That kind of fascinated me a little bit of like that kind
Uh-huh.
of trying to have a lot of structure around something that is very much about feeling. But then I also thought,
Yeah.
discernment with who you let into your life is important too. And I wonder if there's this kind of a lot of talk now about kind of psychology buzzwords, like people like, narcissist, sociopath, gaslighting, like these kinds of words we use a lot, trauma bonding, that kind of comes up all the time. And people are like, I want to avoid that. I want to avoid that. And I'm like, of course you do. We all want to be safe. And, but I sort of wonder about how much that kind of defensiveness can unwittingly sometimes attract the things you don't want because you're thinking about what you don't want, if that makes sense. As opposed to if you're thinking like, okay, the person that I need in my life has to be emotionally mature. And, maybe you have maybe if you're a vegetarian, you only want to date vegetarians, or if you're a non-smoker, you only want to date non-smokers, like something like that. That's like what you do want, right? And so you're gonna politely eliminate or not even go towards anything that isn't in alignment with that sort of watchword or however you want to look at it for you of like emotional maturity. So I was like, it's
Uh-huh.
so interesting to me that the method seemed to me, the method idea of finding a method was sort of like more of the same but harder work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. More of the same, but harder work. Nothing different there.
Yeah. But also the idea of like, I don't know if this is true or not, but people sort of saying to me like, oh, you cannot meet somebody outside of a dating app these days. And I don't know if that's because of the city I live in or, different factors. But that interested me because that was coming from female friends. So I turned to a male friend who's in a relationship, happy relationship, and I said to him like, what do you think about dating apps? And he goes, oh, the only guys I know that are on dating apps are gym bros that are looking for sort of something short term or on the side. And so I was
Mm.
like, here's this disconnect, right? There's always this disconnect between when you're talking about male female relationships. What fascinates me is the disconnect between the two ways that we're socialized as men and women and how much that impacts what we believe is
Mm.
possible, what we look for, and how we look for it. And yeah, I to know it's just of interest to me. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, just deep sociological phenomenon happening. I mean, I've been out of this dating world, so I'm like you, sitting on, like a bird's eye, like on the side and kind of just observing. And I'm wondering too about how people are treating each other,
Hmm.
like
How people are
that,
treating each other. Yeah. That's such a
like,
key expression, isn't it?
I was,
and how that makes you
oh,
feel. And I think going back to the feeling, yeah, I think I think we all three align in like, well, what's in front of you? How do you feel? What are you going to do about it? That's kind of my
Mm-hmm.
approach to life. Right. And so, how does that
But
person
also
make you
that
feel? Yeah.
you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to. A friend of mine said to me, like, he said years ago he was dating some girl, and then he said to me, I didn't know that I was allowed to break up with her just because I wanted to. He said, like, I stayed in that relationship so long because I didn't know you were allowed to leave. It's like you had to
Mhm.
have like a big reason, like a big fight or maybe like a label for that person, even of like this person's abusive. You can just leave because you're not happy. And I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic that plays into some of this stuff as well of like when you're not
Well,
thinking, what is my yes? How do I feel around other people? Sometimes I think some people feel like healthy boundaries of like, this person's fine and I'm fine, just don't enjoy their company. I don't feel peaceful around them, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. Or just like maybe you don't feel excited around them. That's a good enough reason to not spend
That's
time with
right.
them. And it's not a punishment. It's not their bad. It's not abuse. It's not like any kind of label. It's just, it's like a puzzle piece. Just doesn't fit, and that's fine. And everybody in that situation is fine, you know? So I think
Mhm.
that could be a kind of missing piece for some people, is that you're allowed to choose situations for yourself that are healthy for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that it seems like we need to have a mindset shift around dating. You know, here's the belief system. I have to stay because there's no problem. Or the only way that I can find someone is if I'm on a dating app. There's no one in the. I was at I guess it was a book in San Francisco the other day. And the speaker said, who's single and relationship? And there was most people single. I say, is it hard to date in San Francisco? And everyone said, yeah, it's really hard to date in San Francisco. And that's a belief system. What I think
Mm-hmm.
happens, I don't think dating apps are bad. I've actually heard phenomenal love stories from dating apps. It depends on where you're at in your vibration to love and if you're ready to receive it, because the person will appear wherever. It doesn't matter if there's no one in the city except for that one person. Your person's going to show up when you're ready and when your belief systems around what you deserve are clear, you know, and coming
So true.
from that negative place. We learned in the Love Alchemist notebook, you don't do that. You don't sit there and say, I don't want somebody who's emotionally unavailable. I don't want this. You do say, I need universe, someone who's emotionally mature. And then you look at yourself and you say, what in me is a positive vibration for this emotional immaturity? And you dig deep and you do that work. Right. And I think that's the disconnect that I see with all my clients in the
Mm.
readings is um I think they just think that you don't have to earn your soulmate, or you can just go around, I guess, sloppy dating. It's like you have
Mm.
to be the same way you show up to your job or whatever that thing that's really important for you. You have to show up for this. You can't allow this energy into your space. I mean, no offense. If you want to have fun, go ahead and have fun. But if you're having one night stands all the time, just intercepting all this energy that you don't want anything to do with, what do you think you're going to keep receiving? You know? And so that's where when I pulled the Love Alchemist back out was because I started banging my head against the wall, you know, because my guy that I'm with now showed up right in front of me at my work. I knew from the back of his head because I dug
Oh.
deep and I did the work. Now, who knows? You meet multiple people that show up with this gleaming light when you've done the work and you're ready, and that it can move, it can shift, you know. And this is no offense to anybody that I've dated or am dating. There is this glowing spot.
Or will date.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm just kidding.
When you're a vibration. And if you're not getting that and you're attracting these negative matches that just are the absolute opposite of what you want. I have a client who was like, she's really looking for someone who, she just broke up with her boyfriend. She's looking for someone who can match her energy with finances. She's really motivated, really successful, and she's looking for this like masculine counterpart in that. And so she got really excited. She met this guy, and then she's like, he's freaking homeless. Like, you know, and when it reminds me of
Oh
Jessica's
no.
story in a Love Alchemist notebook
Okay.
about the person who had a little bit of an issue with the height. You know, it was like everything's perfect
Yeah.
about this guy,
Yeah.
but ooh, and you know, if you read the book, you'll know the story. I'm not going to say it, but it's like she got the exact opposite of what she was looking for, and it's because she keeps saying, "I don't want no broke guy," or whatever she's saying. She's like, "I'm not doing this. I don't
Mm.
want somebody who can't do this." And it's like I'm hearing the literally vibration match her to that, and she just keeps
Yes.
getting these people who are relying on other people for their finances right now or aren't where
Yeah.
she needs them to be.
And I think,
Mhm.
just to back up what you're saying, because I think you put that really well. The city I live in, people are always saying to me, and I see this online, I see this everywhere, forums, whatever, such an unfriendly city, so hard to make friends here. It's really hard to be new here. And it's crazy because my experience is like this city is full of amazing women who are doing interesting things with their lives in all different fields and who are incredibly supportive of each other and don't tear each other down. Like, you know, those kinds of like people that you look for, like you're like, oh my God, there's so many of them here. And I was like, this is fascinating because again, it's like you getting that confirmation bias or whatever. Like if you keep saying it's not out there, then it's not out there. If you keep saying it's hard to make friends, could be you're hard to make friends with or whatever. So like, yeah, definitely be looking at yourself and looking at the words coming out of your mouth because they're creating your reality. It's pretty much exactly what you were saying, just like a real world example in a different
Yeah.
sort of,
Well,
do you know what I
you're
mean?
quite
Like a different,
interesting. So I feel like you're going to attract all the people who are interesting and not boring and friendly and communicate. Like you're going to attract all of those positive vibrations, right? So then it's like, well, are you interesting to talk to? You know, like, do you need to get some new hobbies? Like, not to be mean, but that's what I would suggest.
no, but it's, are you developing yourself
Mhm.
as a person is what you're
Yeah.
saying, right? Like, are you assuming that you have a right to have friends or like, you know, I should have this many or whatever it is? Or are you making sure that you're a quality friend and also that you're not wasting your time being a good friend to a crappy friend? Because it's like you're just throwing, I have no idea. I have no analogy,
Yeah.
but you know, you're just kind of like wasting it, right? Like you're just
Pearls to
kind of
swine.
throwing
Yeah.
it. Yes, that's
Yeah.
a good one. Yeah,
Mhm, mhm,
exactly.
mhm.
What was the quote you said?
Yeah. Pearls to swine, right? Like the pearl of your devotion and your care and your love to somebody who's not appreciating it just snarfs it up. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And I'm listening, of course, through a kind of a different lens of, you know, both not haven't been talking to people, clients who are actively looking right now and don't have any single friends at the moment. But what I am hearing in your conversation is kind of being able to a reflection on yourself that what's happening in your relationship life, you can shift by shifting that relationship to yourself, that you are the central character. And I think
Mm.
too that a lot of people, they don't make themselves the central character. That's taken me till midlife actually to fully do. I've done layers for sure. But to make, my value clear to myself, you know, that's step one to me, right?
Mm.
I gotta love me for me. It's just amazing. Sometimes I listen to what comes out of people's mouths, either in media or just random conversation. And I'm like, you really feel that way about yourself? And then you expect somebody else to feel differently, right? And
Mhm.
it's makes me sad or it makes me like shocked or whatever. But yeah, so that I'm hearing that. And like also what other little thought trail did that spark for me? There are certain things that I've learned about myself that I must have through trial and error. So a lot of it's learning, right? Especially when we're
Mm.
younger.
Mhm.
And these you have to go through a certain amount of school to get to a place in yourself where you can even hear this conversation, honestly, that we're having, right?
Mhm.
So I honor the student journey. I honor, the younger parts of myself. I honor all the people I've had to be to become who I am. And until I could hear this conversation, I couldn't hear it. And so the thing that I've been coming back to with my relationships lately has been okay, now that I know myself, and it actually evolves over time and it shifts. And stop me if I'm taking this into weird territory because I may,
Take it
but
all the
it
way there.
evolves and it shifts. It evolves and it shifts. Like the things that I used to be my like little nut of like, yeah, this is my these are my values, these are my must-haves, these are my yeses, which I framed out of my I don't want, which I do in the book, right? Like if you don't want that, then shift it into a positive, which I'm sure you do with your clients, Courtney. And immediately it's a totally different vibration. So then taking those from, when I was in my 20s and then in my 30s and my 40s and 50s, and I was thinking about like how it's expanded this what I must have in my relationships, so that at this point in my life, like there's only like a few of you out here that I'm going to let in. Honestly. And I was thinking about this last year and then again over this Venus retrograde period, as I've been like kind of reaffirming it, is that there was a point where I decided that all of my relationships were going to have the same criteria. And I remember talking to John about it in terms of what I need and what I want from them. I remember talking to John about it, and he was like, yeah, but that's for your best friends or your intimate circle. And I'm like, no, it's going to be for people I hire and work with. It's going to be people who are in my past, old high school friends. It's going to be the same, because frankly, this whole dividing it up into like, oh, she's capable of giving me this, but not that. I just have no patience for it anymore. I'm 52.
But also, I mean, I think sometimes we have, especially like social media age, right? How many followers do you have? You have this impression that you can have lots of friends is not realistic. You can really have 3 or 4 close friends that you talk to maybe sort of every day to second day, and maybe a partner if that's how your life is structured. And then there's about 15 people you can have like a fairly close relationship with outside of that. So like if you get into a space where you really like yourself, then and you like your own company, you're like, those 15 people better meet my criteria, right? And it's not in a bossy like, you better do things the way I want you to. It's more just like, even just on a vibrational level of like, oh, we went for coffee and all they did was complain, and it's been like that the last 5 or 6 times and it didn't feel great. It's like, well, you can approach that person, or you can remove that person from your close, whatever you need to do to kind of put a healthy boundary there that's appropriate. But it's like, I think we have this idea of like, oh, I have 100 friends. And it's like, those people are not your friends. Those are people and even then, should they know you? Like, should they be allowed to know you? How close do you want to be to these people as far as like how much energy you give them and being discerning? I mean, I think what you're saying is just really healthy to me. I'm like, yeah, make sure there's little 15 to 20 slots in your life are realistically filled with people that add to your life and not take from it in whatever way that's meaningful to you,
And I think the good thing about that is like to hear her say that, like what I'm hearing is I've experienced excellence in certain relationships, and now I refuse to experience anything less than that. This is kind of going off kilter, but I have a client, right? So she thought she really loved her job, but she was in this really awful relationship that it wasn't abusive or anything, but I think I would have preferred maybe abuse over this. It was just and she's like, I love my job. It's the best thing ever, all this stuff. And this relationship was really murky. So we read for a year, we did all these readings, and I'm like, I'm helping her. And she finally does all this shadow work. We work through it, and she meets this amazing guy. She did meet him online, and she's so happy now. I mean, her whole world has changed the color, and she looks at the job that she loved and she goes, I hate it. But she was experiencing very minimal happiness in her life, that this felt really good until she went up here, and now her job's here, right? I'm not on the screen. And so what then happened was, okay, we have to get real serious about what's going to make you happy in this area now to meet you there. She just got promoted. She's really happy, but that's where we have to bring everything up to that level. And so hearing Jessica say like, you need to meet all of these excellence, I've met my soulmate. I've experienced true happiness in relationships. So lowering my vibration for you just feels unacceptable, feels intolerable. And that's what happens. So we learn the contrast, we work through that contrast. So we know what we don't want, so we know what we do. And then you get that juice. And then you're like, okay, everything has to feel like this, or else I can't do it. Because and sometimes we work through it, right? In different levels and experiences. But that's what I heard from you. And I think that's when we do tolerate less than what we deserve, because everything in our environment is at that lower vibration. You only start requiring better when you get a taste of better.
So I
Absolutely.
think that is super, super key, because I think if you come from, say, a family where you're not valued, you have to learn to value yourself, right? And you are going to almost like keep yourself at this level and then be like, well, it's not me, it's the environment, whatever, right? But how do you keep in mind that there is better? Does that make sense? Like, how do you have to just kind of know in yourself
Here,
that there's better?
there's a
Or
couple different ways
does
you
that
can
make
get
sense?
there. I mean, I was mentioning shadow work, but you're like, okay, well, a person who, how do they find that? And I think, I always laugh because nobody comes to me when they're happy. This this girl that I'm telling you the story about, we worked so hard together, probably once a week, and she met the guy, and I didn't hear from her again. And I'm so happy. Like, it's almost like when I hear from people, I'm like, uh-oh, and I think you get dropped to your knees, and that's when you have to say thank you for this experience, because it's a reframe. And some people never meet their shadow. That's just the sad truth, right? Some people never do in this lifetime. But
Does that mean that because they're not meeting their shadow, everybody else is?
probably, or they're equipped with a bunch of people who haven't met their shadow, and they're just orbiting around that.
And it's like a loop. Yeah.
And typically in that situation, the three of us would be repelled out of that room. Like, I had a grandfather who
Oh, yeah.
never met his shadow. And the day he died that I went to go see him, he goes, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I was like, what did
Damn.
I do to you? I'm 21 years old. Like, and I knew he died never meeting his shadow. Right. And I'm like, well, he'll be back. I think he might be my dog. But anyways, it's a story for another day. I think you get knocked to your knees, and that's when you meet the shadow. Right. And you have a choice at that moment. Do you stay down and you can meet other people in that lower level? Some people do drugs, some people turn to just different negative behaviors, or you can take that moment as an opportunity to rise up. And you have to love yourself so hard that you get so disciplined about that work. That girl that was experiencing that really low vibrational relationship, she met with me once a week, and I sent her home with homework, and she cried her eyes out for a year. I sat with her some of the times, and it's not easy, but now she's experiencing this amazing life that I'm like, what did I tell you to do? Like, can you give me
Can I get the notes back?
So
I guess that's a really important thing to remember, is that when things aren't going well, or like you say, like you're kind of on your knees and you're like, oh my gosh, it's very easy to feel like giving up, and find the gold in those really, really dark moments, because that's the way out, is through, never around. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, don't take those rock bottom times in your life. Those are normal, and like, use that, right? Like, it can be a gift.
Yeah.
It's all how we use it. Yeah. It's the alchemist way, right? It's like turn the
Literally.
tap into gold. You have to recognize that, when you're feeling victimized, when you're feeling like life is unfair, when you're feeling like the world is against you, when you're feeling like the astrology sucks, whatever it is that you're internalizing, legitimate pain is always legitimate. Invite it in. Invite it. What am I going to do with this? Am I going to let it, create a narrative and then create an identity and then I'm going to create an identity out of the narrative, and then I'm going to walk around with a really limited version of myself and start acting that? Or am I going to be an alchemist? And like you said so beautifully, Courtney, love the shit out of myself and of myself through it and really be with it and go, what can I create here? What can I create out of this? And, that has been an ongoing journey for me. Like we've talked about this, Courtney, being brought to our knees over and over again. I think, especially as healers, people who identify the path of awakening, know how to utilize that period a little bit better than the average person. But then the average person comes to us for that perspective. They want us to show them where they are and how they can work through it and how they can become powered from disempowering experiences. And I think that's just probably the greatest challenge and blessing in life is to be able to do that. I mean, if you can do this, like what more is there to me? That's in my mind. Like if you can turn something so shit into something amazing, like I think you've done a pretty good job on planet Earth. That's just, so yeah, I think it's our role to kind of help people step into that perspective. I mean, it's what I willingly undertake. Yeah. And you too, Courtney.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
to go back to
absolutely.
your question, Hermione, it just came through to me. You were like, okay, so what do we do in this shit? Like, how do we know when it's shit, right? We experience, most people who have a tough time in relationships actually experience a tough home environment most of the time. I mean, sometimes the story is different, but a lot of the times we say to ourselves, I'll never treat my kid like that. Or I'll never make anyone feel the way that I felt. And we start to alchemize that instantly, right? Sometimes we don't even have kids because we never, ever want anyone to go through what we just went through again. And so I think that is the moment that actually occurs. And so people start to rise up a lot of the times just in that moment of being like, I never want to have that environment again. They'll move out really young and they'll start, co-creating different relationships. And then they can refine and refine from experiences. I think we refine through experiences. That's how we come up with our values in the first place. You guys can probably think of your first boyfriend. I took the special of the day. You like me? Cool. You brought me a Valentine? Awesome. You got me the Jaw Rule CD. We're going to date. And I didn't like him at all. And I was like, what else can you buy me? I was in fifth grade thinking, and I'm like, I don't like this guy, but then we learned slowly but surely, these are my needs. But we typically learn them through the experience, like Jessica said, oh, I don't ever want to date somebody like that again,
Didn't feel good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just so hard when it's happening to someone you know or to yourself. And I think it's almost like an epiphany moment that we don't talk about because it's not shiny. It's like, do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes we kind of think of, a biography of a famous person and it's like, and then they had their breakthrough. But if you look at those lives, everybody's also had a time where it was really dark and it was really rock bottom as well, right? And so I think it's nice to have those discussions as well of like, it's those dark nights of the soul, those are normal. And if you're in one of those, that's actually great. Like, just keep going, because I mean, the problem with that is they do get really dark, but it's normal. That is still an okay part of life. And it doesn't mean the rest of your life is going to be that way because it passes. And I think sometimes there's a little resistance, understandably, of people to want to sit with uncomfortable things. And so then you get those kinds of, if I just, dated the right guy, had the right job, or bought a pony, whatever it is, these kind of external things to avoid, that internal,
Yeah. And I think that's where the world is failing us. And I don't want to get negative here, but like Hollywood does not sell a film that doesn't have a dark night of the soul included it. You can watch in every rom-com. You're like, oh, they're falling in love. Oh, they're about to get in an argument and break up. And then heal, become their best selves, and now they're a vibrational match to stay together. We know that. We're programmed to know what's going to happen. We watch the movies. Oops, they hate each other. They're falling in love. We know what's going to happen. And I think that this is a subconscious thing that's not shared with us. And I think if we know, if we were taught it, like this is the way the cycle goes, death and rebirth, it would be a lot easier for us when there was that death moment. You know, and I think a lot of people are talking about this more and more, but what's being normalized, unfortunately, is Love Island, Temptation Island, Real Housewives, you know, and what's normalized is the ick, the nasty, the yucky, the negative, you know, the constant I don't like retrograde energy. You know, it's like that's normalized and that becomes what real life looks like. And then nobody knows how sweet it is to have worked with Jessica Shepard, who has achieved the greatness and the excellence through the alchemy, right? And I think that's the problem right now that we're facing is that people don't understand the cycles of life that we chose to go through. And I think that's why you
Yeah, that's a really good
up
way of
there.
putting it.
Isn't it interesting too that like so the crisis of our times, it's like Earth, right? Like global warming and the Earth's resources not being respected and materialism when it comes to all that. And when you talk about cycles of death and rebirth and of becoming and of falling away, that is the Earth. All you have to do is look around you and respect nature to have that mirror and have that recognition of, oh, that's me too. I'm a part of this. This is the cycle of my life is the same as a tree or the same as a flower, the same as I had 3 little birds on my fountain this morning, and one was brand new and one was middle-aged and one was old. And I could tell the difference between all 3 of them because guess what? They get gray feathers too. They start to lose their color, and the little baby birds are bright and beautiful. And the middle, I mean, you can see the trajectory. And I just find it so incredibly comforting that I can look at the earth, I can look at the cycles of nature, and I could go, yeah, decomposing is a part of this reality. You know, it's how I turn into soil so that new flowers and new food will grow someday. And we're just a part of that. And it's a feminine psychology. It's a feminine perspective and awareness. And here we are, you know, in this time of history where that is, you know, it's wanting to push through, like you're saying, Courtney. It's like coming more out into like in certain pockets, certain conversations, you can hear these type of things being normalized: death, aging, sickness, dark nights. You know, in this other world, pathologized, you know, that we're doing everything we can to stop aging. We're doing everything we can to not be sick. We're doing everything we can to not take our sick days. You know, and it's like this, like almost like 2 worlds, like just getting further apart. And I'm going, hey, that's okay with me. I know who I am. I don't need, you know, this dimension and this dimension. They're obviously like, they're not matching up very well, right? I'm not going to try and convert something over here that is beyond my desire to convert into anything. You know, I didn't create that. In other words, I'm going to stay in the co-creation. And I'm going to stay in the kind of more feminine and integrative and perspective because I like to integrate. I like to keep rising. I like to keep, you know, going, wait a second, I feel so good in all my other relationships except this one. So I'm letting that one go. Because I want to feel awesome. And I see you and you as a reflection of me. I see you as a reflection of the healed work that I've done because you couldn't come into my life until now, you know? And so I go back to that, I honor the cycle, right? But always with, I am the central character. And when I start farming my stuff, my psychology out to other people, that's where it's problematic.
And
You know what I mean
But
by that?
isn't it? It's interesting as well, like the sort of main character of your own life and creating your own life. I feel like there's been a lot of socialization around sort of you become a secondary character in your life as a woman in relationships. And I find that interesting too, of like, sometimes we almost can have unconscious conditioning about that, and you really do have to, you are the main character in your life and you're not the main character in anybody else's life. And that's good. you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm probably the main character in John's life. I'm pretty sure I am.
I agree. I saw that picture he took of you, and I was like, this person, whatever they were watching, only saw her. Like she was enjoying the show and he was watching her the whole night. And that was the best view he could have had. So I do agree. Sometimes I do think actually men might be the side character, but that's for another conversation. Not to be rude, men.
Oh, I'm not saying that they're not. I'm saying that sometimes they're taught that they are
the
when
main
they're not.
character. But I do think that we do avoid this world is filled with instant gratification as well. And so we're constantly avoiding the death cycles. I saw a quote today just to go on that topic, and it said, you asked for flowers, so the universe gave you rain, and people don't understand that sometimes death is the way through. The rain feels like death, right, to some people. And that's how everything is born, and flowers are going, just like the birds with the gray feathers, flowers have to decompose and come back to life in the spring. And, I think it's just that we just want beauty everywhere. We just want instant gratification. We just want our soulmate now. And so we just take the special on the menu and then we're going, well, why doesn't this feel good? It's like, well, because you're not trusting the process here. You're not going through the process that you promised yourself.
And I think too, we weren't taught that. I mean, I know this is like something that I wish, like if we were in a tribal, if I had been raised in a tribe, for instance, or maybe in one of my previous incarnations, this kind of knowledge, sacred knowledge would be taught and handed down. But I can tell you that on my favorite grandmother's deathbed, she did not want to go. Nobody wanted to talk about death. Nobody, it has not ever been validated through any person in my life, the cycle, right? I've had to discover that on my own. Nobody ever explained that the cycle of life and what happens when a bird dies, or, the garden is supposed to do what it does. And, I had astrology, right? So we know that like, that's a wonderful template when you use it in the right way, understanding the cyclical nature of reality, and just from the dark of the moon to the new moon, right? That kind of transition every month that happens from this kind of, if you feel into it, you can feel it, this really kind of dark feeling of, I don't know what's happening, feeling more emotional. And then you kind of feel that. And then at 7 days later, you're off and running. So you can actually connect to that cycle through the phases of the moon. But again, like, I wasn't taught this. I had to go seek it out. And like you said, Courtney, I feel like that's where we are failed over and over and over again. But, we're trying to change it.
Yeah.
You and I.
Just because we are with the love alchemist herself, and even though you say that you've been out the game for so long, if there's someone on here listening, that is feeling frustrated with the dating apps or is feeling frustrated in their co-creative power, what is one, like Hermione said, what's the first step? What would you suggest? Because Hermione and I are both here because we read that book. I'm assuming she probably read it 10 years ago, something like that, the way I did. I was a lot younger when I read it. What would you say to someone who is on their knees right now? What's the first thing you would do?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty different in that I can only draw on my own experience. But if I'm not getting what I want out of a relationship, I am fine being alone. And I think that I think that's how my book starts out too, is to call off the search. Like if you're
Mm.
looking for if you're looking for love and you're getting all caught up in that, there's no good men, which is a chapter in the book. And, dating is really impossible in this city. Apps are just superficial, blah, blah, blah. If you hear yourself circulating this, it's probably a sign to step back and go into yourself and like discover yourself, right? And I like solitude. I enjoy solitude. I've learned to enjoy myself more. I've learned to take pleasure more deeply in being alone. Through this, my husband and I actually sleep apart because I like solitude that much. When I was a little girl, I remember saying, someday I'm going to get married and my husband and I are going to live in separate wings of the house. That's my manifestation. I manifested it. So I would rather, if somebody were coming to me with like, I'm just not finding the person and feeling very frustrated, I think there's already too much attention on the person out there. That's already a sign. I would, like I did it. I just got back into myself. What do I enjoy? What do I like? Am I an interesting person? What do I like to wear? What are my values? If I were to go on a date with myself, where would I take myself? And then I take myself on a date, right? Like, well, why am I
That is
waiting for
such a
somebody
good one
yeah,
as well. Like, date yourself,
yeah.
make sure you're dating yourself.
Like,
My
why
battery's
sit at
dying,
home?
so I'm still listening. I'm just going to see if I can
Okay.
plug yeah, just so you know, I'm not running away.
Yep. Yeah. So, start acting like the person that somebody could love. And that really has to do with falling in love with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like really doing inner work of, and, where am I bumping into walls? That's a good question. Like, why do I keep attracting the same person? Why do I keep attracting the same type in a different body? Same guy, different day, right? That is a whole line of inquiry in and of itself. That's a really worthy one because it'll get you to the root of some childhood wounds.
Yeah.
With your parents. And it'll get you to the root of some things that shaped you and are still holding you back in your search. Yeah.
So call off the
Sorry
search
about that,
and
guys.
fall in love with yourself. Because you're
Call off the search, fall in love with yourself. Yeah.
and I mean, there's all the other things to do with that. So yeah, I love that. And I think that's probably the hardest advice some people want to take, is what do you mean fall in love with myself? I want to fall in love with somebody else. And it's like, well, that's going to make you more lovable when you fall in love with yourself. How about you, Hermione? Like you took the Love Alchemist and, what was your first step in that to finding, your match?
So I kind of came from it slightly from a place of feeling like I know something isn't right here. Like I know I'm not doing this right. And I was single at the time, but I still reread that book when I'm in a relationship or not, because I think that process of like, even if you're in a relationship, especially maybe if you're in a relationship long term, you still need to go out and date yourself, as a creative person or just as a human being. You need to be like, do I actually like baseball, or am I just like, have I kind of adopted some of this other person's tastes, or, are you doing things out of routine? Are you checking in? Because there's layers to like shadow work, and things like that. So it's always good to be doing those things in that Love Alchemist book and revisiting them, I think. So I think whether you're in a relationship or not, if you want to improve your relationship, always start with working on yourself. Because even if the other person is the problem, you still were okay with that person being a problem and trying to create a relationship with that person. Does that make sense? So it's like you're still attracting things into your life. And I think that was as a I think if you're born with the mindset that everything is my fault, you're very, very lucky. Because even though when somebody else does something, you're going to blame yourself, you're always going to be in a place of being like able to learn, able to grow, looking for growth, looking for healing. And if you're the kind of person that thinks is always pushing it out there, like, oh, it's not my fault because of this and it's not my fault because of that. Sometimes it's not your fault. Not everything is your fault, obviously. You can kind of go too far in that direction. But I think we tend to have a bias one way or the other. And it's a real blessing if you're somebody that blames yourself.
It takes,
And
I
so I
like this,
think,
it takes responsibility for, it can take responsibility for yourself and your reality and your, I don't,
yes,
I don't,
I think
I'm
responsibility
like
is
kind
a
of
better word.
wordsmithing words. I'm like,
I think I was kind
oh,
of
no,
thinking
I
blame
don't think it's
because,
lucky to be born as somebody who thinks it's all my fault, because that can go down shame. But being able
but
to
that's the
take
thing, it is shame.
accountability, yeah,
When
yeah,
you are that way, it's can start out as shame. You are
mhm,
taking on the shame, you're taking on the blame, you're taking on the toxic level of that. And that's why it's important to grow as a person so that you are accountable and responsible instead of blame and shame. Does that make sense? It's like an evolution. It's like Pokemon. It evolves into new things as you grow as a person, better things, better ways of doing
yeah,
things, better boundaries.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that you go back to the Love Alchemist notebook, being partnered, and I remember you telling me this before, and I kind of see it like, I know that you've done the artist way too, and like
Mhm.
almost like an artist way for, self-love, healthy self-love. And also co-creativity and manifestation and getting back into your own feminine energy and, examining beliefs and stuff like that. I mean, we all need to do these reevaluations periodically. And I think that is at the core of the Love Alchemist work. And there was something you said, Courtney, and I don't remember what it was at the moment, but I remember thinking just a few minutes ago. But I think you said something like, nobody wants to be told these things, or there's going to be resistance to being alone or something. And I thought, welcome to the life of a personal growth author. Because one of the things that is true that I've recognized, and I also recognize this as a health coach, and also when I tried to take astrology beyond the predictive and into the processing realm, people like to sit back. It's a lazy thing, that not everybody is inclined. Everybody can, not everybody is inclined to dig in and want to do the work. Like,
Mm,
it's not an attractive prospect to some people. I think that's true. I would get
I agree.
health coaching clients, and they would come to me. That's why I quit health coaching, honestly, because they come to me with like full of spit and vinegar or whatever, and be so psyched. And then, all it took was one
Spit and
little,
vinegar.
all it took
Love that
was
expression.
one little challenge to like change, right? To like do something a little different. And it was like,
Hmm.
I'm not going to do that. Can we do something else? And that happened
Hmm.
enough times. And Courtney, you are so much better than I was at your age, and even like probably later, because, I would have the like, oh my God, but I didn't have the, I don't know. I just feel like you can gently kick ass and get people to like you can coach them into doing something hard a little bit better than I felt equipped to doing. I would just get quite frustrated. And I do feel that you have to be willing to, walk on your knees or try something new, or, change up your strategy to do it. And as a personal growth writer, I just don't think my sales are very good because people don't
You
do
write
the
the book
work.
so you don't have to deal with them head on.
Exactly. No, I know that's a strategy. I know that's a strategy because
Isn't that very
um,
Cancer sun though, as well? Like kind of coming at it a little bit sideways. Do you know what I mean? Here's the
yeah.
thing, coming at you sideways. I love that.
I mean, I still have to
Yeah.
obviously do all the work of getting it to the right people, but I mean, the excuses and the hedging, and I think at a certain point I blew up my clientele. Like, and I at the time I didn't mean to consciously, but it was totally like a Freudian slippage happening. where I just got fed up and I needed a break because I was having this experience of like having people want to be caretaked along. That's another Cancerian experience, wanting to be, have it spoon fed and just keep coming back, and some people are better equipped for that than others. I'm not.
I don't have the patience for that. I've learnt that very recently, and that's okay.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
want my clients to be as healthy as my friends. So how's that for raising the bar? I mean, literally, like across the board, I've decided that
Yeah.
it's not even
That's interesting. That comes
yeah.
back to something somebody I was talking to who works in the business world was saying something about that, where they were like, "Oh, we're going to lose this client." It was a small client, and it was so funny because in the business world, his boss said to him, like, "Yeah, that's fine. We don't mind if we lose the bad clients because they
Mhm.
make room for the good clients." And I was like, I remember like hearing it and going like, "Wow, that's fascinating," because it's like sort of I never expect the corporate world to have emotional intelligence, if that makes sense, or like
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And so it was very interesting to me that it was like sometimes in those like higher sort of, what would you call it? Like as you go up in business, if that makes sense. Like I was not expecting, I was sort of thinking people were going to be more like, got to keep every client, got to, and like, yeah, sometimes not a bad thing to have certain qualities you want even in clients, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Like
know,
that's allowed.
I may be like deleting, going back to erase this with AI. All my old clients are listening, going, "Oh my God, is that what you did to me?" It was only a few of you. It was only a few of you. Doesn't take much for me. But it just was that time where I had to kind of take a quantum leap, right, into this new paradigm, what you're talking about, this emotional intelligence. And, it's something too, like with not only with your like corporate, like, wow, that's really cool. But like, for instance, my newsletter has to um, resonate. I don't mind losing people because they're the wrong people for me. You
Mm,
know, rather have 4 people that totally get it than 100 people that are just like looky-loos, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah. They said Netflix actually took all of their B and C players out of the equation. So employees as well. They took all of the B and C players and just let them go. And they had less of a team, but it was all the people who were truly invested in the company and on the same frequency. And Netflix, that's when their numbers went skyrocketed. So that was like years ago, but that was their strategy was let's get rid of the dead end and see what happens. And
mhm.
it was all people that were in that higher consciousness with them. So it totally makes sense. And I will say I'm with you guys. I've been a manager. That was what I did before I did this. And when I first got into it, I made people cry because I demanded excellence. And I actually had to figure out, okay, I can't be this person who I'm making people cry all the time. I'm going to actually sacredly seduce you into becoming on my level, and you're not going to know that I'm doing it. So it's actually
Mhm.
fun for me to now sacredly seduce people to raise up their frequency because I know every time they do, mine raises. So that's how you said I'm better than you at it. I actually think I started out like a complete, like I might have similar placements to dictators in my chart. Um, and I realized, oh, that's not good. I have a goal and I need people here with me. So I'm going to sacredly seduce you into bribery that you'll meet your soulmate when you heal your work. You'll get more money when you do the work because it's true. So I actually kind of dangle little carrot to pull them out along the way, is how I do it.
Mhm.
It didn't start out like that. It really started out of I actually cut everybody out. People would drop like flies working with me or even probably being my friend because I was like, no, I'm not hanging out with you if you act like that, and that didn't
Mhm.
really, the universe put me on a different path after that because I was like, well,
Yeah.
I am alone again, aren't I? And I'm working 8 hours by myself.
That's fascinating. That is really
It is.
interesting.
I like that sacred seduction, Courtney. That do you have a class on that? Because I feel like you could make a lot of
It
money about
actually just
that. Like
came
I
to
would
me
sign up.
yesterday that I do that.
Okay, okay. So stay tuned.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. But I love that we're all very, we all demand excellence and all have very limited patience for less than that. And so anybody listening, that might be a key to having a better
That's
I
the
feel like
takeaway.
for me, it's very like I think it shocks people because I am very easygoing, and you can tell the difference between somebody's going through something and somebody is permanently in this space, right? And so it's kind of I think sometimes people are a little bit shocked that my boundaries are so healthy because I am kind of warm and kind and encouraging, but like I'm not messing around at the same time. It's kind of funny. So it's interesting, yeah, where that line is for different people.
Healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Yeah. I love it. Is there anything else, other takeaways that we're kind of just to wrap this up, any other takeaways for our topic, which has been vast? We have covered cheese. We have covered love. We have covered uh, up leveling. We have covered a little bit of shadow, feminine perspective. What would you ladies say? And and Courtney asked us the question, what we would what kind of advice we would give to a person who feels frustrated with where they're at in relationship. Do we want to end on that? Or how do we want to do?
Yeah.
I think you have to be your own best friend, don't you? Frustrated in relationship, like that's tough. And when it's happening, you want it to whatever it is you're hoping for, you want it to happen now, today, faster. But always, come back into quiet space and like ground yourself in that space and really hear what's coming up for you. Really listen to like that inner talk because it's sort of I think sometimes we're hearing stuff but we're not really stopping and listening, and so we
Mm,
can kind of ignore it a little bit, but it's affecting us, right? So if you're kind of in that space and you're like, oh, I'm lonely, it's like, well, maybe sit down, get a little notebook or make a cup of tea or whatever and start listening to yourself because sometimes your inner creative, inner child, inner grumpy teenager is trying to tell you like this always happens to us, this never happens for us, those absolutes,
mhm.
those are kind of really some real gold in there. So make sure you're being your own best friend because I think that's kind of where everything comes from, isn't it? Whether that's career, relationships, anything, you know?
You want your own best friend to listen, right? Like that's the best. Having a best friend who like really sees you and gets you
Mhm.
and is present to you.
And
And
says
present
nice things to you, right? Because
says
some
nice
of that
things.
self-talk, I've heard people say things sort of without thinking, like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm like, I would never say that about myself. I would never say that about a friend. And so I always feel like when that talk is coming out, is that you? Is that how somebody spoke to little you? Make sure you can't expect anybody else to talk to you that much better than what your self-talk is, if that makes sense. I mean, you can expect it, but like you're not going to get it until you're
Well,
raising your own, you know.
mhm.
I feel
Your
like
own
that's where
inner
everything comes
narrative.
from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Courtney? You're a fount of wisdom because you work with so many people too. And what would you say?
Well, I will
Number
say
one.
my best friend would never let me settle for less than what I deserve. So I think that is what the gold is there is being your own best friend. I know my best friend is going to tell me, she's going to see it and she's going to reflect it back to me. But advice that I would give anybody that feels, whether they're looking for a relationship, just looking for their path, looking for their purpose, I would say figure out what you want. You know, what
Hmm.
if you knew
Hmm.
you couldn't fail? If you knew you could have anything
Mm.
because you can, what would that look like? And when you come from the yes and say, hey, I really want a relationship that has these things, and I really want a job that lets me do this, and just know that you have no limitation. There is no limitation. The universe wants to give you everything you want. And that would be the advice. The universe wants to give you everything you want. So what do you want? And that is going to be the gateway. So if you're listening and you're feeling like how, I would say figure out what you want and then let the universe take it from there. And I mean, you do have some work to do. So probably get the Love Alchemist notebook. And other than that, you're solid.
Thank you for that plug. Thank you for that plug. And to your point, I would say you are the I am. Like, right? You are the co-creator. You can, to reinforce you what you're saying, have anything you want, but you have to know that and like have that visceral experience of that and have that known and felt experience of that, whether that is, let's say you're telling yourself you can't stop your negative thoughts. Well, if you can't stop your negative thoughts, how are you going to manifest, you know? So it's like on these very minute inner listening, to your point, Hermione levels. Sorry.
That's totally fine.
Tongue twister. But on
It's
like
not
this,
an exam. Don't worry about it.
but like inner listening and listening to, like, for me, being in my body and listening to these like little complaints it has is huge for me. And that's being my best friend. It's going to be different for everybody.
Hmm.
Right? But I'll get like a little tightness in my spine when I feel like, oh, I don't like that. And then I'll listen to it, and I'll go, okay, I don't like that. What am I going to do about it? Or can I have a response that is not so excruciatingly, like if it turns into like frozen for me in my muscles, like, well, let's soften into that and see what else we can do here. So it's going to look different being your own best friend, I think, for everybody. But I think at a baseline level, like one of the things that I came onto this call, and I also hear Courtney, like, what do you want? What do you enjoy? Like for me, that those two like converged. Like I want to feel enjoy all the time. Like I want to enjoy myself no matter what I'm doing. And so I came into this call going, I want to feel as comfortable being myself in the public as I do on my own. That's just like my own. Well, because I want that, I can create that. I've created so many other things in my life, but it never stops. The co-creating, the being your own best friend, it never stops. And it keeps going on this continuum of, yeah, it may seem like a minute thing to you, but trust me, it's not. Like your little minute things are actually big deals. And that's a part of being a best friend. Right.
Mhm.
So I just was kind of integrating a little bit of both of your great
Yeah.
pieces into like my own experience. I was like, oh yeah, I just kind of did this kind of intentionality. Like, what is it that I want? How do I want to feel? Even just being on this call with you two.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how I did.
The co-creating never
We'll
stops
see.
and the healing never stops.
Yeah, absolutely. And they go hand in hand, right? Yeah. So thank you both for being here on this call. It was so much fun, such a pleasure. I knew it was going to be a fun conversation. You both are fascinating. And I am just so blessed to have you in my life and have you be in that circle of friendships that feel very empowering and very vibrationally well matched.
Well, thank you. I adore you. I'm so glad to meet you, Hermione. I actually struggled with the name
Same.
Hermione when I read Harry Potter. I thought it was Hermione was how I said it in my name
Hermione,
until I
yeah.
watched the movies, but I love that name. And it was really, really
Beautiful.
just a pleasure. This was a high vibrational. This was a yes. More of this.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about the yes just now, I was like, yeah, I've done a lot of nodding. And I was like, yeah, like what's she saying? What's she saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much
Let
for
me
having me. And
start.
it's always so good
Yeah.
to connect with you, Jessica. And it was lovely
Okay,
to
so
meet you, Courtney.
let's do it again.
Yes.
Really, yeah. Just keep the conversations going, especially the empowering ones where we actually are and I think I can speak for you on this too, Courtney, where we're changing the narratives, where we're actually bringing something different that's not on Netflix.
Yeah. Perfect. I love it.
Mm.
This was,
Yep.
I have another call to get on to, and I'm ready. Jessica's done this to me twice this week where I'm fired up to go because I just got the juice. So thank you
I love
guys.
it.
Really appreciate it.
Yay. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.